Dave Grohl says he still can't listen to Nirvana music anymore, which is, you hear something, you're going through your life, your normal day, you hear something like that, and, the loss of Kurt Cobain obviously affected a lot of his fans of music in general, people that didn't really like Nirvana all that much, still probably a little bit of an effect. And you forget, here's a guy who, lost a friend, partner, brother, however you want to describe it. But Grohl is going to be on the new GQ. He's the cover story on the new GQ magazine, and he gets into a whole bunch of topics. But I think what was the one that really, I just read the article, the one that really sort of hopped out at me was a couple of points that I'll touch on. Grohl describes the experience of being in Nirvana as, quote, some of the greatest highs of my life, but also over the course, one of the biggest lows. Admits that it's almost impossible to listen to old Nirvana songs. He says, and I quote, I don't put Nirvana records on, no, although they are always on somewhere. I get in the car, they're on. I go into a shop, they're on. For me, it's so personal. I remember everything about those records. I remember the shorts I was wearing when we recorded them, or if it snowed that day, end quote. Can you believe that? That's pretty, I can't remember. Even the most important things in my life, I still have a little bit of struggle with. That's why I love so much that we have phones now everywhere, so we can snap pictures and take little quick videos to sort of just remind you a little bit of, of memories and things of that nature. But he says he remembers every little bit of it. He also expanded on Kurt a little bit more, saying, I still go back and find new meanings to Kurt's lyrics, not to seem revisionist, but there are times when it hits me. You go, wow, I didn't realize he was feeling that way at that time. He also spoke about Courtney Love, which I found to be interesting because if you remember, they didn't speak for the longest time. They were suing one another for the longest time. The article goes and they interviewed Courtney for it as well. And she said, quote, Dave and Chris knew the inner workings of Kurt and never pointed fingers at me, which I am grateful for. We got into a bizarre litigation and an apex of treacherous predator attorneys, but that was over money and the way suicide affects family, which we are. I regret anything between myself and Dave deeply. I feel like I missed out on some great years with him. I remember seeing them when they got together eventually after some time, and the hugs, and there genuinely seemed to be a real love and respect between the two of them, and not only Dave and Courtney, but of course Chris and Pat to a degree as well. And then Dave told us about something that he's working on, which is crazy. So you go back to Sonic Highways and the idea that he had, and you can clearly see that Dave is not bored, but I feel like he's, what's the word? Maybe bored is the word. You can tell clearly from following him, from being a fan, it just seems like he is not happy with writing and recording and putting out stuff. He wants to create something more, which I think is kind of cool. So you go back to Sonic Highways and this idea of let's travel to all these different cities and let's write and record a song in a short amount of time and let's film it so people can see the process of it. And then the next idea he had, which was abandoned eventually, was let's rent out the Hollywood Bowl. We'll build a studio on stage and we'll sell tickets and people can come and actually watch us do the recording process, which is kind of like an insane revolutionary idea. You go buy tickets to a show. Imagine going to buy tickets to something that everybody doesn't get to see, right? The show is the result of the record. We don't get to see the record. We get to hear it. But now you would be able to literally watch them on this makeshift recording studio that they planned on building on the Hollywood Bowl stage and actually sit there and do the record. Now, that never actually happened, but with anything with the Foo Fighters, I don't expect that Dave is going to give up on that anytime soon. I wouldn't be surprised if we do eventually see something like that one day. And what's fascinating about that is you can do that for 2 or 3 weeks. So like you can have people coming every day for 2 or 3 weeks to watch you put together an album. I think that would be fun as all hell. I really, really think that would be really, really fun. And I honestly think that somebody should do that somewhere. I mean, we've all seen those exhibits, right, where people live in a room in a mall somewhere with the glass and everybody walks by and sees them sleeping and napping and watching TV. Why not recording an album? But this is what Dave plans on doing now. Take a listen to this. He's working on a project which involves a 25-minute piece of continuous music. It's an instrumental. He tells us he's got a studio in Los Angeles where he's going to set up a whole bunch of instruments. He says, and I quote, several drum kits, a load of guitars, bass, rhythm, and lead. I'll hit play, and the clock will start ticking. I'll record the first drum part. Then I will run to the next drum set and play another drum part that will record over the first drum part. Then I will do the same with all the guitars, all assigned to a different moment in the instrumental. So he's going to layer, I guess, use that looper technology to layer over one instrument over the next. He went on to say that the best bit is we'll film everything with multiple cameras. So by the end of it, you will see and hear one song being played for 25 minutes with 6 different Dave Grohls playing every note on every single instrument all the way through in one take. That sounds ridiculous, I know. The worst part is that's why I've had 4 hours of sleep, he said. Every night on this tour, I have to write, then memorize all the music for this thing, for all the instruments before I go back to LA in 2 weeks. So not only has he come up with this crazy idea, but he's also put a time constraint on himself, which is fascinating to me because most musicians really don't. Outside of a touring schedule, you don't really have much time constraint. But this is what Dave Grohl is doing. Now, nobody in their right mind would put this kind of pressure on themselves if they weren't, unsatisfied with the. Not that I'm saying he's not happy with the band or regular recording, but this guy takes what essentially is his job and goes, how can I just scrunch this up and make it more difficult and make it harder and drive myself to be better and more and more and more. I mean, it's an incredibly rare quality. I think Jack White is the same way. Jack White likes to make things difficult for himself. That helps him drive himself a little bit farther and harder. We're seeing a real different breed of musician today, certainly, than we saw 20, 30, 40 years ago. So if you were wondering what Dave Grohl is up to, he is concocting a 25-minute instrumental in which he plays every single instrument in one take. That's the level of insanity that we're at with Dave Grohl these days.